Bible worm, reading the Bible with Bible worm.
Welcome to Bible Worm, getting to the core of the biblical text. I'm Dr. Robert Williamson, Professor of Religious Studies at Hendrix College and Theologian in Residence of Canvas Community in Little Rock, Arkansas.
And I'm Dr. Amy Robertson, Director of Lifelong Learning and Music at Congregation Or Hadash in Sandy Springs, Georgia. We're here every week to discuss the biblical text, both as biblical scholars and as people of faith, one Jewish and one Christian.
This week, we're reading the text for Pentecost with Acts 2, 1-21 and Philippians 4, 4-7. We ponder the connections between Christian Pentecost and Jewish Shavuot, both commemorating the establishment of a new relationship with God following an act of dramatic liberation. We notice the democratization of the Holy Spirit in this text, which pours out on all people so that everyone, young and old, male and female, rich and poor, of all languages and cultures, become prophets and visionaries of the kingdom of God. And we linger over the idea that the Spirit brings not only cataclysmic change to the world, but also a deep peace that passes understanding, inviting us to engage the world with gentleness, even as God's kingdom is breaking into the world. Thanks for joining us. Hey, Amy, it is time for the last regular season Bible Worm of the year. Can you believe that?
I actually cannot believe that. No.
It has been another year of the Narrative Lectionary.
It has been another year, and I can already taste the dairy treats that will come to me on Shavuot. We eat dairy on Shavuot. I don't know why. Nobody knows why.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe somebody knows why.
Are there specific forms of dairy that you eat on Shavuot?
The more delicious, the better. Blintzes are a popular choice. I would say that's the most traditional choice. And also cheesecake is a good choice.
Ooh, I like cheesecake.
Ice cream is a good choice.
I don't technically know what a blintz is.
See, that's why it's the most traditional choice, because a lot of people who aren't Jewish don't even know what it is. So that makes it like
an insider thing. Yeah.
It's like a crepe that's wrapped up with some sweet stuff in it. So like a cheese blintz you would have if you're trying, like a sweet cheese, like almost a cheesecakey, but like not as thick. But you could also have like a cherry filling or blueberry filling. It's like a sweet, kind of like brunchy thing.
That sounds lovely. One of the things about being Christian is that we don't really have foods that are associated with like religiously. I mean, like there's some traditional foods, I guess, that some people do, like eating ham on Easter.
But it's like just more.
Yeah, it's just like a family choice. Yeah, it's not like this is what our community does.
Yeah.
I feel like Jews have good foods.
We have a lot of foods. Like I joke, it's like funny, not funny, that in the sort of proverbial divorce between the Jewish community and the Christian community, this is, take this lightheartedly. Some of the like most important theological ideas I feel like became so developed in Christianity that they fell away from mainstream Judaism. Mm-hmm. So like I would joke that like, oh yeah, this whole God is love thing. Yeah, you guys got that in the divorce, but we got the pickles. Really good pickles.
Yeah.
And many foods.
That seems like a fair trade.
Mm-hmm.
My kid, yeah.
Anyway, here we are, as you were saying.
So the reason that we're talking about
Shavuot.
blintzes is because we're talking about Shavuot. And the reason that we're talking about Shavuot is because it is known in Greek as Pentecost. And the reason we're talking about Pentecost is because this is the episode for Pentecost. And so there is the connection of all of these things.
Yeah, and you thought we weren't making any sense. We're totally making sense.
Amy, the text that we're reading today is we actually get every year on Pentecost, we read some part of Acts chapter 2. Often it's just 2, 1-4. This year, we get 2, 1-21, which is a fuller, we still don't get the whole, like Peter's, all of his sermon and all of that, but we get sort of a fuller rendition of the Pentecost story this year than we sometimes get. And then we're going to jump back over to Philippians 4, 4-7 to kind of tie that conversation up as well. So that is where we are headed. I think that the way to do this is just to begin with the text, and then we can talk about Shavuot and Pentecost and all of those things in the context of the story itself. Does that sound all right?
That sounds good to me.
All right, then I will begin. Our text today is Acts 2, 1-21, and I will be reading in the Common English Bible. When Pentecost day arrived, they were all together in one place. Suddenly, a sound from heaven like the howling of a fierce wind filled the entire house where they were sitting. They saw what seemed to be individual flames of fire alighting on each one of them. They were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit enabled them to speak.
That's quite a scene.
That is quite a scene. It starts with just the announcement that we are on Pentecost Day. And so can you give us a little framework for understanding where we are in time and what Pentecost might have meant to a first century Jewish audience?
Yeah. So Pentecost. So not after Passover, sort of starting on the second night of Passover, we begin this, what we would call the counting of the Omer, the counting of the days. We count 49 days, and then on the 50th day, Pentecost, Shavuot in Hebrew means weeks. It's like we have, it traces the story of Israel from the moment that we come through the sea, the moment of the Exodus, to the moment that we receive the Torah at Sinai. So we count the days, like from this, like one big salvific act to the entering of a covenant and sort of a fuller revelation of God's nature and how God is going to be in relationship with us. And Shavuot and Passover both are pilgrimage holidays when people would come to Jerusalem and make offerings. So I would imagine that at this time, Jerusalem was a total madhouse, but also still like close enough in time to Passover that there's a sense of connection between them,
right, that
I don't feel between any other two holidays necessarily on the calendar.
That's really interesting, Amy. The Shavuot you were saying means weeks, and so Shavuot is a week of weeks, right? It's 7 counts of 7 days.
7 weeks, yeah.
And then the 50th day after that. In Greek, the full name of Pentecost is He Pentecoste Hemera, the 50th day. And so this is how it would have been known to Greek-speaking Jews in the first century. And Hebrew, Aramaic-speaking Jews, of course, would have called it Shavuot. And in the divorce, as you were talking about, Christians took the Greek name, and Jews took the Hebrew name. And so we're talking about the roots are in the same holiday, and they were originally the same thing. And then this story kind of takes what you're talking about in the Jewish understanding and moves it toward a Christian understanding. The other thing that we should probably say there is we've been moving along in the book of Acts and then in Philippians to we've been like 10 or 15 or 20 years down the line.
Yeah, we've been out a bit.
Now when we jump back, we're 50 days after the original Easter.
Yeah.
And so we've had that scene in Luke's telling where Jesus has risen and appeared to the disciples.
Yes.
And then he has ascended into heaven about 10 days ago. And then they've been in Jerusalem waiting. Jesus told them to wait until the Spirit comes upon them. And so they've just been waiting in Jerusalem. You were saying that the celebration of Shavuot is related to the giving of the Torah at Sinai. It's interesting to think about that moment in the Hebrew Bible story. The Jewish story is the kind of constitution of the people of Israel as a people around the Torah after the escape from Egypt. And so in a sense, this is am I thinking correctly? Like this is the beginning of the Jewish people as a Jewish people, like the original.
The word constitution is interesting. Maybe I would want to think about that a little more, but I think about it as this is the covenant. Like this is the tie between the enduring tie maybe sort of retying, because like we had some covenants already, but like this is sort of the terms of what this relationship with God is going to look like in an ongoing way.
So it's a sort of a new formation of an ongoing relationship or something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
We might also then, when we think about what is this Pentecost that we're reading about today in the Christian tradition, one way of thinking about it is a yet still another new formulation of the relationship, or a tying together of the relationship in a different way through the revelation of the Spirit, whereas in Sinai it was through the revelation of the Torah to Moses. It's not entirely clear historically when that connection between Shavuot and the Sinai covenant came about. Certainly it was there by the 2nd century, so within 100 years of our writing. It's not entirely clear whether Luke himself would have known that connection.
Oh, interesting. He might have just experienced it as a harvest.
It might have just been celebrating a harvest holiday.
Yeah.
But I just think there's so much theological legs to connecting it to Torah that I just kind of want to do that.
I'm like, what? Wait, they might not. Okay, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay.
I still want to make the connections myself though, because I do know about that connection. And so that's what I'm gonna do. Amy, the way that the Spirit approaches them is as a howling of wind and flames of fire. And so, I think we probably ask this same question every year, and maybe we answer it a little differently every year. But this image of the Spirit showing up in wind and fire has, I think, resonances in the tradition. Are there particular resonances that occur to you?
Yeah, yes, and they're not totally coherent. So I don't know if they should be, but but they're not. The sound of my translation is a violent wind, which I'm just going to take as just like a really strong wind. It makes me wonder at least about the Ruach Elohim, which is over the waters at the time of creation, that you could read as Spirit of God, or you could read, sometimes Elohim is understood as like just really big, like a really great wind. And so this could, I don't know, in some ways tie those things together. And that fits nicely with the idea that you were bringing up of like, there is something new happening in the formation of like reality, the formation of relationship at this moment. So that's one. The other one that comes to my mind is the flashing fire sort of around Sinai. And I don't remember there being great wind, but maybe there were a lot of things. There was like lightning and fire and it was like earthquakes, and I don't know.
It would be awkward if there was all of that and then there was no wind. It was like a perfectly nice day.
It was a still day. Yeah, the scene at Sinai is it's sort of like what Elijah was expecting when what Elijah got was the still small voice. He was expecting the big show, the laser lights. He didn't get the laser lights, but that's what the fire made me think of here. Although I don't know, fire that's sort of like appearing and like sort of sitting on their shoulders, that has like a different sensibility to me about it. How do you associate these images, either generally or like as they're showing up in this context?
I love the way you're reading that, and the combination of the Ruach Elohim as like a reference to creation, like here's a new creation moment, and the fire as evocative of Sinai and the giving of the Torah, bringing those two things together in this one kind of moment. So here we have a new creation. And it's not a new Torah, but it's a new giving of the relationship with God in a different kind of way. Like I love bringing those two images together. The thing that had occurred to me was actually the Elijah scene that you're talking about.
Oh, good.
Because he does get the fireworks. It's just that God is not in those fireworks. And so I don't quite know how to make the connections, but he does get the earthquake and the wind and the, is there a fire in that text? I can't quite remember.
I don't know, but it's that kind of thing.
Yeah. And so, but I don't in the end of the day, like Elijah, you're exactly right. It's like the God was not in those things. And then God comes in the still small voice. Here, God is in those things, but just that sort of like when God shows up, these are the things that kind of happen is in my mind.
Yeah.
This issue of the fire, you're right. It's not exactly the same as just like, I mean, it's fire it's like fire that is upon them. The traditional reading is that it's divided tongues of fire.
Mm-hmm.
And the divided there could be modifying the tongues of fire, but it could also be modifying like dispersed among them.
Mm-hmm.
And so the dividing is like not just one tongue is like a forked tongue, which always is a little weird to me.
Yeah.
But tongues of fire divided among them. The way that I have tended to think about the dividing there is, there is one fire divided among them. And so they each kind of have their own manifestation of that fire, but the fire itself is united. And so to think about that as representative of the Spirit would then mean that there is one Spirit that falls upon each person individually. So the Spirit manifests itself in one person in a particular way, but the Spirit, it's the same Spirit that unites everybody. So it's a way of trying to hold together. This is a communal experience experienced by individuals within the community.
Mm-hmm, that's really nice.
This idea of the Spirit being poured out we're going to see a direct quote of Joel later on, which talks about the pouring of the Spirit.
Yeah.
But this idea that the Spirit is poured out in some way is a Hebrew Bible idea.
Yeah.
I was curious if it took you to any particular places.
Oh, gosh. I think my answer is going to be annoyingly vague, but I'll give you what comes to my mind, which is just this sense, in my mind, I associate it with what I would call sort of like the apocalypticism where we find that in the Hebrew Bible, by which I mean not like the end of the world in some kind of destructive way, but some kind of tearing of the curtain that separates the two worlds. That's like what the revelation is, that the curtain is pulled back and that the truth that has always been the truth in the heavenly realm, sort of overtakes whatever we've come up with as our attempts at truth in the earthly realm. Rabbis at least usually read these things as being like, this is like olam haba. This is the world to come. Like this is sometime in the future. I don't actually know when the biblical text thinks that is supposed to happen. If maybe I've been too sort of infused by rabbinic understandings of it, but certainly the vision of it is present in apocalyptic texts.
I think that's right. And this question about when did they think it was going to be, I think I think it's open. And one of the things that Luke is saying here in Acts is like, that time is now, right?
Now.
Like we've had sort of an open date and now this is it.
Yeah.
Two texts that are sort of apocalyptic, but maybe more proto-apocalyptic that I'm thinking about are both at the end of the exile when the Jews have been in Babylon for 70 years. One is in the second part of Isaiah, where God says, I'm going to pour out my Spirit on the servant, Isaiah. And then in chapter 42, and then in chapter 44 says, I'm going to pour out my Spirit on my people Israel. And so there's a sense in which this like restoration from exile involves a pouring out of the Spirit. On the one hand, on the servant, and then on the other hand, on the people. And so I think maybe one of the things Luke might be working on is that the Spirit poured out on the servant is actually a reference to the baptism of Jesus, which he told back in the Gospel of Luke in chapter 3. And now here's the pouring out of the Spirit on the people. And so in some ways, this is, I don't know, a fulfillment of or a gesture toward, I don't know how you want to talk about it, to second Isaiah.
Mm-hmm.
The other place that occurs to me is similarly in Ezekiel, when Ezekiel is talking about the restoration of the people, and there's that image of I will put a new heart in them, and then I will put my Spirit in them. And so there's a sense in the Hebrew scriptures in which the restoration of the people in some kind of like ultimate way is going to involve God's Spirit being given to them. And so I think one way we might understand what's happening on Pentecost is, as you were saying, like this is that moment in which God's Spirit is being given to the people in a different way than it has been previously.
It's so interesting to think. Of course, it makes sense that the time that would be narrated in the biblical text is coming back from exile, which in a way is like a parallel lived experience in the world to coming out of Egypt. Not exactly the same. I don't want to blur the differences there, but to coming into something that has a lot of hope in it, but also a lot of, you're coming into an empty desert. Like, congratulations, Jews.
Right.
Or you're coming back to this land that you've been taught all these songs and poems and you've had all these dreams about. And you're like, oh, actually, this is really hard and this is a mess. And and to have that sense of your need for ongoing, care and relationship from God.
I like that connection to the escape from Egypt and then the giving of the Spirit, then the exile or the giving of the Torah, then the exile and the giving of the Spirit, and then here. Because in some sense, the death and resurrection of Jesus is compared to the escape from Egypt and the Passover, and then here's the giving of the Spirit. Mm-hmm. It's the new giving that's going to carry them forward into this new life. I like that. Amy, the gift that the Spirit gives to them is that they are able to speak in languages that they do not know. In some Christian understandings, this has occasionally been thought of as they speak in the tongues of angels, the glossolalia that Paul's going to talk about in 1 Corinthians and elsewhere. But this is not that. And it becomes clear later on that they're just speaking the languages that people speak. And people who may not know their Galilean version of Aramaic are able to understand them in the languages and dialects of the places that they're from. So I'm just when you think about that being the gift of the Spirit, of all the things the Spirit could have gifted them with, that's it. What does that signify to you?
I have so many associations with that. First, just this idea that God could so clearly work through you, with gifts that you have not acquired on your own. Right. God needs to communicate to these people, and you are the instrument of God. And so you are the channel for this, for the words that are coming through you. And it's just one of these cases where, it's so rare and I think so important to have these moments where we're like, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
This voice is coming through me, but it's not actually mine.
Yes.
So that's one. And then you mentioned earlier the idea of sort of the divided tongues of fire on people, that sort of there is this wholeness, but also there's a piece of it that manifests for each person. And I feel like this is an extension of that idea that the wholeness of this budding church, people need to be engaged sort of in the way that they can be engaged. And that's part of the wholeness of the church. And so just like that midrash that I think I've told a bunch of times on this podcast, that when Moses walks by the burning bush, the voice that he hears actually sounds like his father. Mm-hmm. And that's why he stops. This is like that to me. Can you imagine coming to Jerusalem as a Jew who lived in, I don't know where, off in Persia somewhere, and all of a sudden hearing Persian?
Right.
It's, I don't know. There's a special, there's a special sort of opening of the heart, I think, when you hear your mother tongue.
I love that, Amy. And, I think you're sort of gesturing toward this is what it means for the church in some ways. And I think that's a nice move to make. And, this is not the case that the Spirit gave the people gathered there the ability to understand them as they spoke their language. It is the Spirit gave them the ability, exactly as you're saying, to connect with people in the languages. And you could extend that to say in the traditions and the cultural manifestations that are dear to them. And so there seems to be some kind of call toward the apostles, and I think to the church after them, to engage with the world in ways that the people that you're engaging with, that resonate with them. They don't need to be on your terms. You need to learn how to be on their terms. I think that's a really lovely way of reading that.
Hi everyone, it's Bobby here from Bible Worm. We hope you're enjoying the podcast. Amy and I started Bible Worm a couple of years ago because we wanted to create a space where we could talk deeply about the Bible in ways that bring together our academic backgrounds in biblical studies and our deep engagement with communities and people of faith. We decided to make this resource free because we want everyone to have access to sound biblical scholarship that connects biblical faith to everyday life. We hope you're finding the podcast fits that need. That said, while the podcast is free, making it is not. Amy and I and the rest of Team Bible Worm spend a lot of time and energy studying, recording, and editing the podcast to make it freely available to the public. If you enjoyed the podcast, and if you find yourself in a position to support our work, we hope that you will consider becoming a Bible Worm supporter for as little as $4 per month. For a bit more, you can also get early access to episodes, weekly liturgies, video Bible studies, join a monthly discussion group, and more. We realize not everyone is in a position to support the podcast, but if you appreciate our work and want to support us, we hope you'll check out our Patreon at patreon.com/BibleWormPodcast for more details. Thanks so much for listening, and now back to this week's podcast.
Well, from there, I think we need the rest of the next part of this text to keep going with this conversation, because it gets so interesting about how they engage with people. So I'm going to pick up in verse 5.
Great.
Does that sound all right?
Yeah.
There were pious Jews from every nation under heaven living in Jerusalem. When they heard this sound, a crowd gathered. They were mystified because everyone heard them speaking in their native languages. They were surprised and amazed, saying, "Look, aren't all the people who are speaking Galileans, every one of them? How then can each of us hear them speaking in our native language? Parthians, Medes, and Elamites, as well as residents of Mesopotamia, Judea, and Cappadocia, Pontus, and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the regions of Libya bordering Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, both Jews and converts to Judaism, Cretans and Arabs. We hear them declaring the mighty works of God in our own languages." They were all surprised and bewildered. Some asked each other, "What does this mean?" Others jeered at them, saying, "They are full of new wine." I'm always reminded at this moment that if you are in a context where someone is reading the scripture aloud, you should probably flag for them that there's a bunch of names in here that they might want to practice before.
I really was impressed that you got through all those names. That's a lot.
One time, I probably have told you this story before. One time when I was in seminary, somebody was preaching in chapel and they were like, "Hey, Bobby, would you read the text?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And so, I just didn't read it. I'm like, "It's the Bible. Like, I know how to read." So I got up there and it was some passage from, I forget where, maybe Isaiah somewhere. And it was all just place names. And I was just like plowing through. And then I got to the last one, which was Ur. But I couldn't, just U-R. But I couldn't decide how I wanted to pronounce it, whether I wanted to say Ur or Ur. And so that's where I hesitated. So I made it through all these really complicated names. And then I was like, and then they were People made so much fun of me. Good times.
You used up all your brain power on the other
I
one.
did. All right, Amy. So in the previous section of text, we got kind of the apostles' experience. They get the Spirit upon them and they begin speaking these languages. Now we get the experience of the people hearing those languages. You were leading us there a little bit in the conversation about hearing your own native tongue. But I'm just curious, like, how do you read their response here? Like, when they hear these Galilean backwoods folk speaking Persian, like, what do you make of their response here?
The way, in my telling of it, it was sort of this beautiful moment of like, I have been seen, like the Lord is speaking to me. This is not how this next part reads to me. Like, I read it more like, well, first of all, it's just noticeable to me that the sound of their talking was enough that people could hear it outside of where they were, and really were mystified and confused and like not sure how it could be happening that this, group of guys from the countryside could suddenly speak in all these languages. And some of them were, as would probably happen in our world today, we're like, this isn't real. There has to be something else happening. Maybe they're drunk. They're just, can you speak another language when you're drunk? Some people say they can.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. These are secrets that.
Okay. These are secrets for another time. Great. So I think their sort of like surprise and first move toward skepticism feels very true to life
Yes.
to me.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. And, Amy, when I was preparing, I was reading Carl Holliday's commentary, and he quotes some passage, I think it was from the Talmud, where they're making fun of people with a Galilean accent, like, because they can't understand what they're saying. And so
That's fantastic.
being somebody who grew up in South Carolina and now lives in Arkansas, like, I feel like this is kind of the way people relate to me when I go to, like, California or New York or somewhere. They're like, what are you saying? And this is kind of the reputation. It's like people from Arkansas who are now in the big city, like talking like an Arkansan. And so people are having this kind of response because they are, they're hearing their own languages and they're like, there's no way those people can be talking that way. Some scholars connect this to the story of the Tower of Babel in Genesis chapter 11. The language that's used here about they were mystified and they were confused is the same language that's used in the Greek version of that story in Genesis 11, where God confuses their languages. And so maybe Luke is trying to, even at the level of language, make the connections for us.
Yeah.
Did you make that connection? And
I
if so,
did.
where did it go?
Yeah, I did, although I didn't know that about the Greek version using really the same language. I'm not sure exactly what to do with it, but in the story of Babel, the people are striving in a particular kind of way that God doesn't like. And so their punishment is to be scattered and to have their languages all shaken up so that they can't communicate with each other. And that has been a force to prevent them from trying to storm the heavens or whatever it is that God doesn't want happening in Genesis 11. And this is like the beginning of the undoing of that, it seems like. Although, as you pointed out, it doesn't say that suddenly these individuals were like fluent in those languages and could understand everything that would be said in those languages, but at least they could communicate what they had learned of God in a language that people would understand. And what's so striking to me is is what you pointed out, that the people are then sort of confused by that because they've gotten so used to the other way. Like their assumption is that people cannot speak across those cultural boundaries. But here we are, speaking across the boundaries.
I love that, Amy. And you're making a connection between language and culture, which I think is really important, that, language signifies something beyond itself, which is a whole like cultural reality. And the sense that we get in Genesis 11 is that up until that moment, people had all one language and all one culture. And the result of that was they tried to make a name for themselves and build a tower and breach the boundary of heaven or whatever, as you say, is happening in that text. And so God creates language and culture as a way of keep making people not be able to communicate with each other. And so I think your way of reading is really lovely. Here is sort of, in some sense, an undoing of what happened then. Like people now are able to connect to each other again. But it is so important that what happens is not suddenly we revert to one language and one culture. This is not a text about homogenization. Yeah. This is a text about being able to reach out beyond one's own cultural center to talk with people in other cultural places. Right. So the language is still different, the culture is still different, but it doesn't have to be a barrier. Right. And some people worry about this text, rightly so, that this is kind of trying to erase, or some interpretations of this text try to erase cultural difference. And it's really important, as you're saying, that it's not that. It's about the embrace of cultural difference in ways that we can appreciate and try to communicate to people across our differences.
I'm so glad that you underscored that, Bobby, because I feel like it's really easy to slip into that from this text, although I think it is not what the text is saying. But what a different story it would be if the miracle of this moment was that all of the people who had come to Jerusalem from all over the world could understand what the Galileans were saying, that they were speaking in their own language and everyone else came to understand. But that's not how the story goes. Yeah. And I think underscoring that difference, as you just have, is it's really a difference. That difference matters a lot for our world today.
I think so too. And in some ways it harkens back to the passage the first part of this passage where there's one spirit that alights on people individually. And I think you might be able to extend that image here to there's yet still one spirit that is what unites the people, but it manifests itself differently with different people in different languages and different cultures, but they're united in that. So where previously what we had was in Genesis, we had one language, they were united in trying to make a name for themselves. Now what we have are there's many languages, but they're united in the spirit that leads them into the world in a different way.
Mm.
This text spends a very long time describing exactly where all these people are from.
Mm.
It did not presumably have to do that. It could have just been like people from all over the world could understand them. Do you have thoughts about why, or the effect of Luke Acts lingering for so long over these place names?
I love that question, Bobby. And I don't know that it would have jumped out at me until you pointed it out, but it's making me think about some of the parts of the Hebrew Bible that are describing things in nature, and that if you attune to the level of detail that is in the text and sort of like the author's awareness of the world around them, I feel like it's really a way of giving kavod, of giving honor to the particulars of, in that case, the created world, the plant life, the animal life, and in this case, the particulars of the human societies. It's like that. I mean, you're around my age. There was some show I used to watch when I was very, very little that was like called, I don't know, The Magic Garden or The Magic Mirror or something. And at the beginning of it, the person would say, like, I see, and then list all the names that were so popular in the 80s or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And you would just sit and wait to see if your name was going to be said on the show. And it really felt like magic to have yourself named. And so I see this as like a lot of care for the details of God's creation through all of these different human societies.
I love that. And it goes back to the like hearing of your own language being spoken.
Yeah.
If you're a character in this text, if you're a reader of this text and you hear your place of origin named, then that feels special to you. That's really beautiful. Some of the people say, what does this mean? Which I take as kind of they're drawn toward it, but they don't quite sure what they're being drawn toward.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them say they must be drunk.
Mm-hmm. Meaning it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is there anything to say about those two reactions?
I just feel like those are two of the, two ways that humans encounter mystery. Like mystery, miracle, anything we don't understand. You can either, maybe you feel that you understand it immediately and have a theory, but if you don't, you either hold curiosity or you come up with a reason that it's not interesting at all.
Yeah.
There's nothing to see here. Like, you don't want to hold that mystery.
It reminds me a little bit of that passage we read a few weeks ago. We haven't gotten to it yet in the book of Acts, but we have in the narrative lectionary in Acts 17, where Paul is speaking on the Areopagus. And at the end of that text, you remember it said, some people were offended. Some people are like, we want to hear more. And some people became believers. And so there's this kind of division of people based on kind of the openness to the possibilities, as you were saying. We see that again and again in the book of Acts. Some people are curious. Nobody here is like, sign me up for whatever they're doing. Like they're gonna do that later in this text. But there are people here who are drawn into it and people who are kind of repelled by it. Okay, well, let's see what Peter says now that he has an audience, beginning in verse 14. Peter stood with the other 11 apostles. He raised his voice and declared, Judeans and everyone living in Jerusalem, know this. Listen carefully to my words. These people aren't drunk, as you suspect. After all, it's only 9 o'clock in the morning. Rather, this is what was spoken through the prophet Joel. Quote, in the last days, God says, I will pour out my Spirit on all people. Your sons and your daughters will prophesy, your young will see visions, your elders will dream dreams. Even upon my servants, men and women, I will pour out my Spirit in those days, and they will prophesy. I will cause wonders to occur in the heavens above, and signs on the earth below, blood and fire and a cloud of smoke. The sun will be changed into darkness, and the moon will be changed into blood, before the great and spectacular day of the Lord comes, and everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved.
Mm.
Amy, this is quite a lengthy quotation from the prophet Joel that Peter gives here. Almost this whole first part of his speech is a quotation from Joel. In the NRSV, the CEB, the translations that come from the Septuagint, it's 2:28 to 32.
Mm-hmm.
In the Hebrew manuscript tradition, it's, what did you say it is?
Yeah, it's chapter 3, 1-5.
One of the questions that came up out of the Bible Worm Collaborative is just, how does this text, like just absenting it for a moment from the book of Acts and our conversation about Pentecost, how does this text live in the Jewish community, or in your experience of the Jewish community?
So this, I feel like, is an area of Hebrew Bible scripture that does not get a whole lot of playtime in the Jewish communities, at least that I have spent most of my life in. We do read from part of Joel chapter 2, which has sort of the same kind of themes in the Shabbat that falls between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, when we're thinking about the day of judgment, like we're thinking about, I mean, in some ways there is some alignment, like that you have to imagine that there is some point in time where everything is going to be righted and everything you've been doing is going to be, like things you are doing and not doing matter. And there's some point in time where there's going to be an accounting of that. And so here in the translation I have in the NRSV, it starts with "in the last days."
Mm-hmm.
That part is not actually in Joel. Joel just says after that or after this.
Right.
But there is a sensibility that, like, there is some point in time after which things will be different.
Yes.
So it is present in the Jewish world, but it's not something we tend to talk about a lot, I guess.
You're pointing out that sort of in the last days, or in the Hebrew after this, and the idea of the day of the Lord. So this idea that's in these Hebrew Bible prophecy, I mean, really starting with Amos, this idea of the day of the Lord, when in some way God's going to show up and set things right and judge things that are out of line.
Mm-hmm.
This is the theme in Joel. And this seems, is that how your understanding is? Peter's basically saying, hey, y'all, today is that day?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think Peter's saying we're here.
Yeah. And whether it's like I don't think Peter is thinking this is like a one-off day where it's like today, but like this is the beginning of the new time.
This is the, Mm-hmm.
So when you look at the way this Joel text lives in our scripture today in Acts chapter 2 as the sort of inauguration of the day of the Lord, or maybe we would say the Messianic age, or the last days, or however we want to think about it, what themes come out to you from this quotation from Joel about what this time period might entail?
I think the first thing I notice is how sort of democratized the sense of the spirit of prophecy and vision is, that it's sons and daughters, and also, sons and daughters. Like, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. There.
Yeah.
And elders and youths and male and female slaves, that it's coming from everywhere, which is sort of like an augmentation, I think, of the story we just saw unfold in that little room in Jerusalem, where suddenly the Spirit seems to have poured out on these 12 people.
Yes.
It's going to be everybody.
I love that observation. So we had the Spirit poured out on Jesus at his baptism, and then on the 12 just a minute ago, and then here it's coming, and it's going to be all inclusive. I think that is so important. Male and female, young and old, wealthy and enslaved. There is no preference about who the Spirit is going to pour out upon. Do you make anything? I mean, I don't know. Like, so sons and daughters will prophesy, young will see visions, elders will dream dreams. Do you do anything with the like prophesy, visions, and dreams? Do you think of that all as kind of three ways of saying the same thing, or do you think of those as specific?
I feel like my associations with those words are much more sort of poetic and in my own in my own mind than actually, grounded in knowledge of this text and tradition.
That's fair.
Do you have an answer to that question?
Well, so the sort of clear thought that I have is that sons and daughters will prophesy. To me, that prophesying is about truth telling, like the deep reading of reality and the way it does or does not conform to God's desire for reality. So this is not about they will be able to tell the future, as it is sometimes read, but it's about they will be able to discern the present. And so to me, there's like sons and daughters will be able to do that. And then we get young and old, and the young see visions, the old dream dreams. And so the way that I've sort of been, I mean, I'm where you are, where I'm just sort of doing a little bit of improvisational thinking. The difference in a vision, like I can see where I'm headed in the future, and I can see the way this should go. That there's a certain energy about that that I experienced more when I was younger. I don't want to say like this is like this is all like young people are all this way and old people are all that way. Yeah. But there's a vision for what is possible that, I can see how to try to go there. Whereas dreaming dreams is like imagining a world that could be, I don't know, it just seems a little more ethereal or something. And I actually do experience myself that way these days, that like, I think I have a broader understanding of like the way things could be, but maybe I have less like directiveness.
It's fascinating. And I think it really rings true to me also. And I'm thinking about two teachings that maybe sort of lend some more support. One is a rabbinic teaching. It's in the Talmud somewhere that says a dream is 1/60th of prophecy. Like there's a relationship between them, but it's not as pointed.
Yeah.
And the other is that there's like an importance to having space for dreams and like dreaminess, almost in the way that there's importance of space for imagination, because we get so locked into the reality that we know that we have to sort of intentionally get out of our own heads in order to be able to dream up something different. And that is something that is harder for elders to do. Like you and I are old, jaded people now. Like we have seen a lot of things not work out the way we wanted. And so that kind of clarity that, sons and daughters and youths might have in their truth telling or their vision, it's hard for us to hold that kind of clarity. It's been fuzzed up a little bit by our life experience, but we can try to at least hold the edges of that open, like hold some imaginal, dreamy space that maybe it's possible. I really like that.
I like the way you're saying that, like the dreaming as like an antidote to the like closure of jadedness. Like, I know it totally makes sense to me. I like that a lot. Like the miracle here is that we're able yet still to keep open the possibility of something more, something better.
Bobby, one thing that struck me looking in the NRSV and then looking at the Hebrew of the text, it should have been obvious to me from the NRSV, but I don't know, I guess it just wasn't. I had noticed that it said, your sons and daughters, your young men, your old men, and then it switched to my slaves. And so I was a little curious about the possessive pronoun, but also just noticing it doesn't say you will prophesy. Like it's talking about everyone around you will do these things, which is itself really interesting to me. But for whatever reason, I understood the you there as like, you're talking to me. Like, and in the Hebrew, it's plural. So it's clearly the sons and daughters of your people. Like this is a peoplehood kind of conversation. And there's no possessive at all on male and female slaves. It's just in the Hebrew. So it's just an interesting shift for me to be like, oh, of course we're talking about a people here, like the sons and daughters of, in Joel, the people Israel, and then in Acts, however they're conceiving of this new group of Jesus followers.
So just to confirm, it is also that way in the Greek that is here in Peter's language. And so the way you're reading that, which I think is right, just to make sure I'm with you, is like the elders among you, the children, the youths among you, will do this. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I appreciate that so it's like the people are going to do this and this and this and this, but then God is still present here, and not just in the like, my servants will do this, but God actually is the subject of verbs here toward the end. Mm-hmm. I will pour out my spirits, which will make them prophesy. I will cause wonders in the heavens, signs on the earth, blood and fire and a cloud of smoke. Mm. I was kind of hanging in there until the blood and fire and cloud of smoke. And then like, I don't know if I want that kind of sign and wonder.
Okay. Can I ask you about the blood?
Yeah.
Blood. Okay. I don't know if we want to talk about blood as symbolizing something. Like blood has a lot of connotations, depending what your life experience has been, depending what text you are reading. Like blood is life.
Yes.
And blood is death.
Yes.
So do you think like, is it pulling both life and death in? I mean, I don't know why it's on the moon, but okay. Like, it's just scary. But do you pull one or the other of those images more intensely? Like, I will say in my own life, in my body right now, I have a stronger experience of blood with death because I don't see a lot of blood unless something bad has happened.
Right.
But that's just my own experience. So I wonder how that sits with you.
Now that's a really good question. The part of that is like the celestial world is responding. So the moon turning to blood is sort of just a celestial, like the moon is also participating in the arrival of God in the world. This question about blood is such an interesting one. I think the way that I naturally read it is, this makes me sad to say, that the arrival of God's reign in a full way is going to result in like violence, not because God is violent, but because the way that God has called people to live is destabilizing to the empire. And so there's going to be bloodshed. And, the Spirit poured out on Jesus and he got crucified. Like exactly the arrival of God in the world in that way resulted in blood. And so that's kind of where I go, like the blood of violence, not wielded by God, but wielded by the empire against the people of God. Mm-hmm. I would love for it to mean something more or other than that. I like the idea of blood as life, which had not really occurred to me, although you're right about that. It's really, I wish that I were a person who had attended many births and so could associate blood with birth. Yes. Yeah.
So I at least want to hold open that possibility or hold open the possibility that it's both. Yeah. Like there will be blood as violence and death. And also there is blood that is birth and, that the way our systems were created to work. So then that just makes it sort of getting down to this like nexus of power, like the interface between life and death and blood as a medium for both of those things. It's hard though. I think it's hard on modern ears.
The other thing you're making me think of is you have upon occasion talked about that birth itself is a moment where life is kind of, it's very fragile.
Yeah.
And things could kind of go different ways.
Yes. It's
terrifying. So the emergence of new life into the world is in its own way terrifying and frightening, and you're not quite sure what's coming next.
Right. It could be a healthy birth and everyone lives and have a wonderful life, or it could take a wrong turn and everyone dies. Like that, and like mother and baby both die. Like either one could be. But if you don't go to the brink, you're not gonna, there's no choice,
Yeah. So if the ambiguity of a new human arriving in the world is that fraught, then God arriving in the world in a new way,
all the more so.
How would we expect it to not be fraught?
Yes. Yeah.
The last line here in verse 21, also from the prophet Joel, everyone who calls in the name of the Lord will be saved. That's where Peter's kind of been headed, I think. Mm-hmm. And so how do you process that everyone who calls in the name of the Lord will be saved?
I mean, I guess sort of as you were just saying, like there's no way for this arrival of God into the world to be other than fraught and dangerous. And if you can maintain your connection to God through the whole thing and not be pulled away by fear or pulled away by whatever else might have you think you should anchor yourself somewhere else, you will be saved. Like you have to trust that is the connection to hold.
I like that a lot. God's not just leaving you out there to survive as best you can, but God is there as a lifeline in the midst of all
you have
of
the
whatever's
lifeline,
happening.
But you have to hold on to it. Yeah.
All right, Amy, the narrative lectionary has us also reading a little bit from the last chapter of Philippians. So I want to move us over there for our last few minutes of conversation. We're in Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 through 7. Be glad in the Lord always. Again, I say, be glad. Or the way I know that is rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Let your gentleness show in your treatment of all people. The Lord is near. Don't be anxious about anything. Rather, bring up all your requests to God in your prayers and petitions, along with giving thanks. Then the peace of God that exceeds all understanding will keep your hearts and minds safe in Christ Jesus. I love these verses. Like, they're just very encouraging to me. When you read them right after the day of the Lord, the bloody day of the Lord, they have a dip like that. I don't know. They just, for me, there was a higher level of like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I'm curious, when you read these verses, what stands out to you from them?
I think reading these verses, especially juxtaposed with the grandeur and fear and awe of those verses from Acts, I mean, it's making me think about our mortality and an awareness that the time to focus on some vast horizon before you, like some expanse of time into the future, and to sort of strive and plan and, angle and work with the systems or whatever, that time is over. That time is coming to an end. The world as you know it is coming to an end, which is scary. And also, it opens up for me the vastness of the moment that you are in, because that is that's what you have. And so I do think there's a shift that happens in me when I know that something's about to end. All this sort of, I guess someone could shift over towards fear, and that's usually not a great communal space to be in. But I feel like I let go of a lot of things. I let go of a lot of questions about what should I be doing, and is this fair, and is this, I don't know, a lot of pettiness or competition or whatnot, and sort of anchor in what can I do right in this moment? And I feel like the comfort of the idea that the Lord is near, both in terms of everything's about to shift, but also in terms of you are not alone, don't be afraid. I think it fits together really beautifully with those big verses from Acts.
I love that. I think that was part of what struck me too, is the arrival of the Lord in that Acts/Joel passage is big and kind of a little frightening.
Mm-hmm.
And the presence of the Lord, like the Lord is near here, is very gentle and very invitational, and
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be okay. And just rejoice, the Lord is near. And so that, like, those two things together, is reminding me a little bit, Paul in Philippians is in prison. At one point he's talking about, I don't know if I'm going to live or die. And I don't know actually which one would be better.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was reminding me of that passage we read back in Acts 16, where Paul and Silas were in prison and they had been beaten. And then what they did was they sang praise hymns and prayed. And all of those are kind of joining together in my mind as I'm reading this about, even in the midst of this big, frightful change of the times that we're reading in the Acts passage, there is a joy and a presence and a calmness and a gentleness that's possible. And so whatever chaos is around us, and whether we are imprisoned and whether we don't know if we're going to live or die, that is possible to find the nearness of God in that.
Mm.
I also love that his instruction to them at the very end here is, let your gentleness show in your treatment of all people. And, we've talked a little bit about how Roman culture was not a gentle culture and that Romans didn't like losers. And, one of the ways you acted in public was to show that you could dominate somebody. These are not unusual ideas in our sort of hyper-masculinized culture either. And so for his thing to be, when you're a Jesus follower, when you're living in the community of God, you will be gentle, is countercultural and pretty radical. And it sounds so simple, but gentleness is the sign that you are living in the Spirit. I think it's kind of a profound idea.
Yeah.
I also really like in verse 7, the peace of God, that the way I know it is the peace of God that passes all understanding, like a peacefulness that is more than you can think about.
You and I, and probably many or most people who enjoy listening to these conversations and studying biblical text, we want to understand things. Like, we want to wrap our minds around the thing. And that is a good and important and holy endeavor. And to also hold space for, there are things you're not going to be able to wrap your mind around. And that is like a feature, not a bug. Like the kind of peace that is available. You can't explain someone into it.
Yes.
And I just think it's really lovely when those ideas show up in a text, because I'm in this sort of like intellectual mindset reading, and it pushes me back into my own experience in the world.
All right, Amy, so that brings us to the end of our texts for today. As you're thinking about these texts and where they might resonate in our time and place, what connections are you making?
Bobby, this season between Passover and Shavuot, or Pentecost, is one of my favorite seasons of the year, I think, spiritually, because it starts with, in both Judaism and Christianity, this kind of grand salvific act that we have totally not earned, that is given to us in a way that feels very urgent. And there's no conversation about trying to earn it or trying to, like, it's just given to us. And then there's a question after that of like, like any kind of relationship, you can have this one beautiful, intense experience. You can have one religious experience and be like, that was great, and go on with your life. And it's not, one experience is not going to, it's not going to change the world for you. And then there's this opportunity in these 7 weeks and leading up to Shavuot to try to invite a relationship and to go through whatever forms of healing we have to go through to be in a relationship. And then this huge arrival at God's sort of like, I don't know, agreement, like, yeah, okay, I see you. Like, I see you showed up, you didn't just be like, thanks, peace out, and have this other kind of, I don't know, intimacy with the divine that wasn't possible 7 weeks ago. And what that looks like is, for me, like genuinely big and scary and powerful sometimes, and also really calming and peaceful and soothing sometimes. And I think holding these two texts together holds the both of those truths in a way that I don't know if we could have gotten. I don't know if there's any one section of text that tries to hold them together. So I'm really appreciating the narrative lectionary for holding these ideas together for us. But I think those are the two things, sort of like the fire and the fresh air, that together keep us in this relationship with the divine and try to be a channel for God's work in the world.
I really love that so much, Amy. And, I think what I'm thinking today is then the next move, right? So like the Spirit of God has come in a new way, and to experience that in all of its frightfulness and peacefulness and value that relationship, which then carries us into the world to interact with other people, both within our community and people beyond our community. And this text is hitting those themes really strongly as well. I love that the gift of the Spirit is to be able to engage people in their own language and culture, which is not necessarily something that I'm actually very good at, but it's something that I kind of value and aspire to meet people where they are and to try to proclaim good news to them in ways that resonate with their own circumstances, their own background, their own way of being in the world. Not expecting that people should be more like me so that they can hear what I have to say, but that I should try to figure out how to be more like them. The Joel text that Peter is quoting also gets on those themes of, the Spirit is an equal opportunity inspirer. And so young people and old people and people of all genders and, some people dream, some people vision, some people prophesy. And so I should be attentive and attuned to everyone around me about how the Spirit might be manifesting in them. And I actually love that, as you were pointing out, that the text never says like you will prophesy, although I think your reading of that is like because you're part of the community, but the lack of you will do this in some ways suggests that maybe we should be more interested in what other people, like the manifestations of the Spirit in other people, maybe should be the first thing we think about. And then how might we contribute ourselves, but not starting with what's my gift. The last thing to me about that, how we are led into the world, is just where Paul lands on gentleness. And I just think that's so beautiful. Like in all of these interactions that can be so hard and complicated and fraught, especially when we're frightened and scared by the times, to be gentle. And that's what he wants to leave us with. And there's not a lot of gentleness in the world, or the gentleness that's there is sometimes hard to see. And so I think being a source of gentleness in the world is a thing to strive for.
It's a real blessing. Yeah.
Well, Amy, this brings our Pentecost episode and also our year of narrative lectionary to a close.
True story.
Amy, one of the traditions you introduced in Bible Worm some years ago, which I really love, is that we begin, as we end one year of the narrative lectionary, we begin reading from the next year of the narrative lectionary so that we're never outside of the text. So I'm wondering if you would read for us something from a
little bit of our first
narrative
reading.
Lectionary for next year.
Yeah. Can I chant you a verse?
That would be amazing.
Okay, so part of our first reading is from Genesis chapter 9, a little section that begins with verse 8. It's a short verse. Vayomer Elohim el Noach ve'el banav ito lemor. Start the conversation again with Noah after the flood. We've already gotten through the flood at this point, so it's good. We're getting to the new covenant again.
Beautiful. So we'll pick up with the narrative lectionary again in September. In the meantime, beginning next week, we're going to spend 7 weeks in our summer series, which is called Disputing with God. Or you wanted to call it My Name is No.
I did. I was feeling very recalcitrant. Mm-hmm.
So we'll spend 7 weeks reading texts where people are engaged with God in some sort of dispute, where sometimes God says no, sometimes they say no, sometimes they have to find a way to work forward together. Our first text is quite a famous one in Exodus 32, the story of the golden calf and the interactions of Moses and the people and God trying to repair that relationship after the golden calf incidents. Yes. So next week we'll be in Exodus 32, 1-20, and 30-35. I'm looking forward to that series with you, Amy.
Me too. This has been a wonderful year of study, and I look forward to summer.
All right. Well, I'll see you next week.
All right. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of Bible Worm. If you've enjoyed this free podcast, we hope you'll help us keep it going by joining our Patreon for as little as $4 per month. You can also sign up for other goodies like early access, video lectures, weekly liturgies, and more. Visit patreon.com/BibleWormPodcast for details.
Bible Worm is produced and edited by Bobby Williamson. Our theme song is sung by Colin Bagby, and our theme music is The World at Large by Dano Songs. Many thanks to all our Patreon supporters for helping make this podcast possible.
Join us next week when we'll begin our 2026 summer series on disputing with God, beginning with the story of the golden calf in Exodus 32, 1-20, and 30-35. Until then, keep on digging.